Welcome back. 2026, we know, has clearly proven a challenging time for Minnesota, with conflict and confusion erupting over strong immigration enforcement. But a group of immigration attorneys says we arrived at this moment after more than a year of deliberate decisions. Leaders with the American Immigration Lawyers Association spelled out that timeline and their current analysis of current ICE enforcement operations in a recent editorial in the Minnesota Star Tribune. It begins with an executive order signed 1 year ago Tuesday and runs through, of course, actions taken up until the fatal shooting of Renee Good on January 7th. And we are so grateful that joining us now is one of those immigration attorneys and authors of that letter published about a week ago, Sarah K. Peterson. Thank you, my friend, for being here. We really appreciate it because we know how important it is to hear from immigration attorneys and people who are really involved and experts in this line of work. As we know, it has been a tense couple of weeks here in the state of Minnesota, but it has been almost a year in the making, and I think it's really hard for a lot of us to truly understand how this all began. Can you give us an idea of where this started in terms of this particular administration?
Yeah, and I think this started, over the past 30 years, where we have a Congress who has failed to enact any sort of meaningful immigration reform. And so now we have an administration who has made immigration a key priority and really using mechanisms that we've not historically seen in this country. And so that sets the stage for what we're seeing in Minnesota. We've had 3 distinct operations by ICE over the last several months. The first is Operation Twin Shield. It was unique to Minnesota. It was targeted. The Immigration Service went after mostly international students who were here legally. And by DHS's own records, only 4% of those cases were actually actionable. And so now we have Metro Surge, which is in the news and we're talking about, which is the largest immigration enforcement operation in history. We have up to 3,000 agents in this country, and we're seeing mechanisms used that we've not historically seen from an immigration perspective.
And when you say the largest immigration action, you are actually talking about throughout the country, happening here, of course, in Minnesota, which I think people might find staggering. We mentioned Executive Order 14159. I recognize that might be a number that people don't really recognize or relate to, but it is what the president signed about a year ago. It specifically called for the, quote, eradication of immigrants' constitutional rights and the communities that support them by swaths of armed and untrained agents. In your letter, you referenced that. Why were you worried as immigration attorneys and as a group that is formed to really kind of support immigration law and the enforcement of that? Why were you worried about that order when it was signed and how it's being applied now today?
Yeah, so part of the enforcement operations is from the budget last summer. There was $45 billion additional billion dollars given to deportation proceedings, and that has really enabled ICE to really ramp up its operations and more than double its workforce. And so what we're seeing on the ground is there's just so many human stories of individuals who are being impacted by this. And look, we recognize the important role that ICE plays. There's fraud, there is crime, but whatever ICE is doing in our communities, it has to be measurable, it has to be accountable, and it has to be proportionate. And this is a country based on laws. You and I have to follow the laws. ICE agents have to follow the laws. This is also a country built on constitutional principles, and I think we're really going to see these ideas take shape as 3 different court cases are now moving through the system. Just late Friday night, a federal court or a federal judge instructed ICE to essentially follow the laws. She said that you have to not antagonize peaceful protesters, and so we're going to continue to see these concepts sort of shape out in the role that ICE should be playing in our communities.
And that was the ACLU injunction.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
And that was that case. People also think about the Operation Paris, or perhaps not, because there have been a lot of legal terms thrown out. What exactly does that do within this overall enforcement?
Yeah, that's the 3rd staged operation. And again, these operations are unique to the Minnesota community. And what Operation Paris does is look at refugees. And as a reminder to people, refugees are people who are abroad fleeing persecution from their countries and have gone through years. Usually it's 2 or 3 years of heavily vetted legal processes before they're even able to come to the U.S. And now what this operation is doing is re-examining these individuals who are really at the final stages of their immigration process and are really expecting their case to be concluded quickly. And On the ground, what we're seeing is the refugees in our communities are being called in to the Whipple building. I think we've been all hearing about the Whipple building in St. Paul. Most reports are that they're being detained and being moved out of the state very, very quickly to different facilities. And look, that's consistent to what we're hearing from most of the people who are being detained right now by ICE in our communities.
Fascinating. What are you as a group and specifically as immigration attorneys doing right now at this very difficult moment, and as people are just trying to comprehend, and maybe especially for those who are being targeted, rightly or wrongly, depending on how a person might sit with this, what are you doing as an organization?
Look, it's an important question. I think that families need to have family plans, because so many of the stories we're hearing are parents being taken away from children, children not able to find their parents. And so having that action plan in place is so critical. And I think everyone needs to be carrying documentation right now to show that they're legally in this country.
That is such an important takeaway, and I feel like I could talk endlessly with you because this is such an important issue. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah K. Peterson, an immigration attorney in our community. We really appreciate your time this morning.